Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. Getting a late start here because we're talking about all kind of crazy stuff. And then I told Matt I don't even know if I have enough stuff to talk about on the show anyway. We're talking about running. The Big Ten 10K is coming up this summer. They have the virtual option again. So I'm going to try to go ahead and run that down here. But I'm trying to get a different approach where I'm trying to actually mix in speed runs instead of just relying on, I could just keep a pace forever. Because everyone always tells me that. Like, I've reached a point where I could just run forever at this one pace. It's like, no, you couldn't. I know, because I thought the same thing myself multiple times. And then every year when I run the race, it never happens. But if you're going to run the race, reach out. Let me know, even if you're running virtual. Because it'd be good to have some extra motivation of people that I know are going to do it. Because I don't think I've had great times in the past. But this year, probably since COVID, I think as of right now, I'm thinking I'm in my best shape since COVID, which is the first year I did it. And I got in shape in a month because I ran hard like every single day. And then I burnt myself out and then lost all my progress. This year, I'm taking a more steady approach. But along with that, with the Big Ten stuff, they started to have the conference meetings, not so much on the Big Ten side and even the NFL, because they're doing their schedule release, which I'm going to get into later in the show. But the Big Ten, they're doing their schedule release. At the same time, though, the thing that I want to talk about first, the ACC is having their spring meetings. And there's tension in those meetings from what I've heard over the Florida State and Clemson lawsuits. I think they both have lawsuits at this point. And we know Florida State does. We've talked about it.
Yes.
And they're at a point where I've been hearing that Florida State, and to a lesser extent, I'm not 100% sure on Clemson, but I'm hearing that Clemson is going to take a move. If Florida State makes a move this summer, Clemson's going to make a move at the same time because they don't want to get stuck. Florida State doesn't have a partner per se, where if you look at all the other conference moves, there's been a partner in the mix. Texas goes to the SEC, they take Oklahoma with them. USC goes to the Big Ten, they take UCLA with them. Then you have Washington and Oregon, they make the jump. It's not like years ago where it was just like, hey, Maryland, you're coming. And then it was like these one-team panic moves where West Virginia goes to the Big 12, Pitt waits it out, and they go to the ACC, and then you split up the rivalries. It seems like some of these TV deals, the conference is looking to stay equal. Where that first one happened because Penn State had been in the Big Ten as an independent, and they had an odd number. They weren't really going to take two teams. When they started with like Nebraska, they take Maryland, and then they take Rutgers. Like they're trying to stay at an even number. So when Maryland jumped, it was kind of a surprise because they didn't have anyone come with them. And I think Clemson's kind of in that part where they're like, we're going to be the Rutgers. We're going to be the team that's available. Like, hey, we're here. We're moving right now. Well, we can get started. Because I'm hearing that there's discussions of trying to get a schedule in place for 2025. Which would mean they would have to make an announcement this summer. I think typically the way the contract rolls over, I think they'd have to make it like July 1. Or so, I don't know if it has to be right before that or right after it. But every year, the way the fiscal years work in that ACC contract, the buyout supposedly can get dropped by whatever million of percentage per year that the buyout's supposed to be. They're not going to pay the top dollar anyway. So right now they're at a point where if they leave, they're willing to leave, from what I've heard, even if they don't have a Big Ten offer. Some of the rumors out there that I've also seen that kind of confirm what I've been hearing is that Fox is willing to make a deal. And I've said this all along. Don't just assume that Fox means the Big Ten. Because I've talked to a couple Clemson guys. They seem pretty confident that they're going to get into the Big Ten, or they're going to have their fallback, the SEC. But you're not going to break up with ESPN and then come back and say, psych, we want to come back. and join the SEC, because ESPN has no incentive to pay them more. So having Fox as a fallback means they're realistically, and I was thinking this beforehand, but there realistically was only two options, where they go to the Big Ten or they join the Big 12, which has a Fox type deal. But surprisingly, in the midst of all this, Washington State and Oregon State, the Pac-2, they worked out a deal with Fox and the CW, which is funny because like the Pac-12 couldn't even get that done. And I don't know what the numbers are. I don't think they've come out yet on what that TV deal actually looks like number-wise. It could be way less than what they would have gotten the Pac-12, which probably makes sense. But from the Big 12 perspective, if that's the landing point for Florida State and Clemson, they're still making more money than the ACC anyway. So I think you have to take the gamble. I think the Big Ten would be idiotic, I've said this multiple times, to not take Florida State. I think they can wait on Clemson. But if they're both there, that's giving you a recruiting in-grounds into the South. It kind of messes up my idea of having an Eastern type division pod thing, whatever they end up trying to go with like Penn State and Florida State being the top two like premier teams in that division, because Clemson would kind of be right there with them. But maybe that doesn't matter. I don't know. What are your thoughts as like Florida State having a potential landing spot there?
I mean, I like the idea of that, and I saw some rumors that there was the potential of a Florida State playing a Big Ten schedule as early as next year, but I just find that hard to believe, because I feel like with the ongoing legal things that they're going with, I almost feel like they have to clear that hurdle first, and that's not going to be done till the summer at the earliest. That probably a more realistic approach is for 26 to try to play that type of schedule and fully exit the ACC.
How long did it take the USC for their announcement? I'm going to look it up.
I don't know.
2 years?
I feel like that's a pretty standard thing when you're starting to leverage your way out, because you're still, the way the athletic department is operating, they already have a lot of those schedules semi-built out in advance. So it's not as easy as we're just going to cut right now, jump into this new conference and magically have a schedule. Like a lot of those future schedules are already built out. So it makes it, I guess, more challenging to try to put that stuff into place.
So it was 2 years for USC, and that seems to be the standard, I think. Because I think Texas and Oklahoma are right around there too. And they're just starting this year. But the one thing that's different, they weren't suing the conference beforehand. Like, I wonder how a fast schedule might be the ACC just saying, we're going to not play you guys, and trying to screw them. Right? Because if they're saying, look, you guys went out that bad, we're canceling all of our conference games and all of our other arrangements with you. Good luck. If you're that valuable, have fun.
And you know what? Mess around and find out. Because so you push them out. It's like, oh, we don't get our games with Wake Forest and Miami that doesn't draw anything. Like, it is what it is. Like, I'd rather play an independent schedule and bet on yourselves with that same standard, that almost like what Notre Dame's doing. I mean, every other team is jumping to the Big Ten or the SEC, and Notre Dame's like, nah, we're good. We're just gonna leverage our own media rights and bank. I mean, maybe that's an option for Florida State. Not that I feel like there's more strength in having a conference, because I feel like even with Notre Dame being independent, I think in a lot of aspects right now, it hurts them not being linked to a conference, because when it comes time for those championship games and you have the automatic bids, Notre Dame isn't getting the benefit of that. Like, they essentially have to beat their independent schedule. They have to win out their independent schedule, and then they're awarded with essentially a guaranteed in.
Well, see, that's why I want to see. I need to see it play out to see what happens, because I've been seeing things where with the Big Ten schedule, they're saying there's a good chance like a 9-3 Michigan could get in because of how hard their schedule is. Where Notre Dame's schedule is so easy that they're saying that they could at max lose one game, and even if they did lose that game, they could still be jumped by a 9-3 Big Ten team. And I'm at the point where I have to see it to believe it. Maybe not the first year, but it also depends on how they perform. Because if Notre Dame's playing a weak schedule, they get into the playoffs at like 11-1, and they get boat raced 42-7 or whatever it was the last time they played Bama. Like, they get crushed. The next time, you're not going to be able to trick me with that inflated schedule. Like, I'm going to say, look, your team sucks. And I think that's going to kind of push them to join a conference. Like, they haven't won, and I'm confident talking about this now because Michigan won the national championship. But Notre Dame hasn't won a big-time game in decades. They haven't won a big-time bowl game since the 80s, Matt. And I know it only takes 1 year. Like, Michigan turned on the switch. They've had their struggles too, especially with Harbaugh there as a coach. Win a national championship, everything changes. But Michigan was historically competitive against the big teams, pulling off upsets, beating Tim Tebow in that one game like years ago, having upsets over Ohio State recently, doing some other big-time bowl upsets, crushing Florida. And then Notre Dame has none of that. Every time they're in a big-time matchup, it seems like they're getting killed. They played Michigan a couple years ago, got killed by like 40, blamed it on the weather. And I'm like, all right, you get close last year with Ohio State, only put out 10 guys on defense or whatever they did, lose at the buzzer, can't seal the deal. When are they going to take that next step? Because I feel like they've run the table. But to me, there's no point in Notre Dame recruiting-wise. You can't point out saying, like, Michigan's recruiting is not that good, that they don't deserve the national championship or whatever. And then Notre Dame's recruiting at, like, a worse level. Where does that leave them? Like, at some point, people are going to look at them and say, yeah, they're like a group of 5 team. They have to have one loss or less to get in. And at that point, does it push them? Because I've talked to a couple people that think that ESPN will do whatever it takes to keep Notre Dame independent. It's contrary to what I've been saying, where I think Notre Dame's a lock for the Big Ten. They think that I'm spot on with the SEC stuff, going to be in trouble with ESPN losing a ton of money. The easiest way for the SEC to stay relevant and for those teams not to want to start to sniff around the Big Ten is to move Notre Dame from the ACC sweetheart deal into the Notre Dame SEC sweetheart deal. And they play A&M week 1 this year in primetime on ABC. At the same time, the NBC game is now Michigan playing, I don't even know who we play, to be honest. It's not a big-time game. So ESPN's willing to throw that money to get Notre Dame on their nightcap when traditionally Notre Dame would have had that game on NBC. Is there going to be a shift in a partnership? Could this be a sign of things to come where Notre Dame's now mixing in more like Georgia type games? Remember how they had the home and home with Georgia, and that was a big deal. So mixing up their national schedule could benefit them because they could stay independent. And remember, they're only playing 5 ACC games. So we don't know what the ESPN sweetheart deal would be for them in the SEC. Heck, it would probably benefit them to only play 3 SEC teams a year, keep 3 ACC teams, and then fill it with filler or crap, what they have now. Lower group of 5 teams or whatever. And then see what happens. Because I have a hard time believing that the Big Ten's going to keep letting Notre Dame schedule what consists of now 3 of their teams. USC they usually play. They used to play Michigan or Michigan State, Purdue. So 4 teams historically that Notre Dame has played a good bit. I have a hard time believing that they're all going to keep Notre Dame on the schedule. So it makes sense with Stanford going to the ACC to try to keep an ACC deal and also get some type of SEC deal to kind of build up their schedule, because it is so weak this year that if they get in with 2 losses and a team like Florida State last year gets left out, there should be pitchforks, because there's no way that schedule is worth anything. You can't tell me, and I know they're going to point out, well, so-and-so, if they didn't want to be jumped by Notre Dame, could have won their conference. And that's what I'm afraid of going forward. ESPN will pitch them in like they pitched Alabama in last year. Because you know they did it. Right? They came in with the hammer and they're like, we want Bama in. We know we own the rights to both. We don't want Florida State in. There was no metric that Alabama should have got in over Florida State, other than it legitimizes Michigan's national championship. That's it. That's the only reason. And they were like, Georgia will take care of them. We'll make sure the dogs don't have any opt-outs. I wouldn't be surprised if Mickey Mouse is himself paying those players to come back for the bowl game. He's like, come on, guys. But schedule's released. Do you care about the schedule, Matt? For the NFL or college?
Not in particular, if I'm being honest.
I don't either. I wanted to get your thoughts first, so I didn't railroad you. The ads come up, and they're talking about the big reveal. And I know what they're trying to push this. I heard one guy, I don't know if I can't remember if it was on like an ad or if it was like the radio guy, but they were saying that this is going to be the next big money maker for the NFL after the draft. I don't think they realize the college connection with the draft, where a lot of people tune in because they're big college football fans and they want to see where their players are going, or they just want to see how their team is getting improved. Or like, hey, are they going to draft? I've been hearing a lot of good things. I hope my team drafts this guy. Let me tune in. I'm not going to tune in because I'm really hoping the Packers play the Bears week 7. No. Why would I tune in for that? The schedule's going to come out and they're drip feeding it where they're like, oh yeah, rematch. Ravens, Chiefs. Come see some more. We're going to be dripping this out. It's like, buddy, just show me the whole schedule. I don't give a shit. You're going to make me sit around and wait for the thing. I'll just wait for the schedule to come out. They did the same thing for college, and I saw ESPN dripping their games for college, and I thought, why? Who is this for? That's the one part of the NCAA tournament bracket reveal that everyone hates, that it takes 3 hours. Just give me, like when college football did theirs, it took like, a half hour? Even that was too long. And I think they made it fast because they knew Florida State was going to be pissed. And it was almost like a joke, because I remember everyone was texted and saying, like, is this real? Like, did Florida State really get left out? Because that's, like, almost impossible. And now you're doing it with, like, the schedule? No one cares about the schedule. It's not like I'm going to be, like, sitting there putting in my vacation time. Maybe people that have season tickets, you're like, oh, I hope we get a home game whatever week. And you're kind of comparing it. But you're making them sweat it out by trying to drip it over, like, a week or whatever they're doing. I don't even know what the schedule is. I just know that they've been slowly putting games out for week 1. And they're trying to hype them up like they're hyping up Aaron Rodgers playing someone. And I didn't even care enough to remember the game. Because the schedule is going to be the same. Like, the Steelers are going to play their division guys home and away. Home and away. They put them at the end of the schedule so I can guess that. I think the Chiefs owner was doing that, or not the Chiefs, the Colts owner. If you guess their schedule, he was giving you something. And I thought, that's a good thing to do. Guess the schedule. No one's going to guess it. I mean, you can kind of do a math type schedule guess, and you might be kind of close. But I remember baseball had a thing a couple years ago where they were like, we try to do an algorithm to figure out our games, but there are some like games that they like to keep on weekends or whatever, and the algorithm couldn't figure it out. So they were still having a guy do everything by hand and fill out their gigantic schedule. And I'm like, that guy has to be insane to be able to sit down with a calendar and put these like little stickers on who's playing who or whatever. However he does it, writes them in for 162 games times 30 teams. You can't get a computer to do it because they were fixing the games. They were like, we need this game on Memorial Day or whatever. So they had to have some guy fix them for them. That's how I know the NFL schedule is like a sham too. They're like, well, we're just going to do it like we normally do it. But even the NFL's one, I think they've been doing a lot of math recently where if a team finishes the top of the division, then they have to play the other division top to try to get some parity, and you get more top games that way. So you could have a good mathematical chance if you crunch the numbers and figured out what percentages they were using. They'd probably have a better chance of picking the Colts schedule than you would of picking the NCAA tournament. Plus their numbers, you know half the games anyway, because you know who they're going to play. But it stinks that we're, in May, and this is the best football news that is coming out. Schedule releases, and like the Notre Dame Texas A&M one being at 7:30. People are hyped about that. It's like, why? Then they put Clemson and Georgia at noon. And you know ESPN is doing that to battle the Fox big noon game. Because why? Who in Georgia or Clemson wants to be out at noon at the end of August? It's going to be 100-something degrees. Can you imagine going to that game? The BO smell from being in the crowd?
It would be wonderful.
It'd be unbearable, dude. Plus, you wouldn't even have that much time to tailgate with that heat. You'd be like chugging beers, trying to just cool yourself down. And then you have to just go in, and you're going to be sunburnt. Because like people complain about the Michigan games being at noon, but sometimes like later in the year, you kind of want that. But you don't want that for Clemson, Georgia, week 1. There's no way you want that. That game should be at 7:30 at the earliest. That game's going to be sweltering hot. I feel bad for the people. Imagine the number of cramps we're going to get in that game. Over-under is probably like 30. Like, that game's going to be bad. And that's why I don't understand why ESPN went that route. And then they continue to put Florida State on Monday night, playing Boston College. Why?
Because that stupid Boston College game is a trap game.
Yeah, but they're not playing in Boston College. Florida State usually takes care of them at home, right? Struggles on the road. This is a home game. This is going to be a beatdown. It's going to be like 40-2 to like 12. They thought the LSU Florida State was a beatdown. Wait till this Boston College game. I want to just see
Mike Norvell just run it up on everyone. Just score 60 points on everyone. Like, oh, you keep talking about Georgia and then just score 60 points a game. Like, why are you just destroying the ACC?
Yeah, that is what he should do. After the Georgia, because Georgia clearly ran the score, but then they were pretending like, we're not running the score up. And that's what I was wondering, like, why did Kirby Smart do that? Was he proving to recruits that Georgia was like, he wasn't going to get a number 1 vote. They lost to Alabama.
But see, the thing is, like, and that's the entire issue. That was where everyone that says, oh, Florida State, they got manhandled by Georgia, was like, all of their top picks that everyone was like, they're so excited for their favorite NFL team was like, they didn't play in that bowl game. It's not like all of those guys that you wanted to see drafted in the top 3-4 rounds, they didn't play. They said piss on it because Georgia lost to Bama in the SEC championship game. So literally there was nothing additional for them to play for. Ooh, the pride points, the fake banner. Everyone pisses down UCF's leg that they claimed their national championship. It's like it gives you nothing.
Matt, Nebraska still talks about their last fake championship in 1997. That's the last championship they ever had. They probably will ever have. So they talk about that championship all the time, even though only one poll picked them. So Florida State could have did the same exact thing. Went undefeated. They would have got one poll to pick them, just like Nebraska, and they would have went ahead and claimed it, and people would have definitely supported it, especially ESPN. They would have talked about that the entire offseason. That's why I was kind of shocked that ESPN didn't kind of push that narrative and try to get the Florida State guys to play. 'Cause I know they're trying to legitimize the playoff, but you could still claim an ACC national championship if they would have won. It would have been, because if you don't have a loss, you can't be disputed. That's what the UCF one was. Did they play a weak schedule? Maybe, but you'll never know. They put an SEC team in front of them, Auburn, and they thought the same thing was going to happen. Oh, Auburn will take care of them. We won't have to worry about them. And it didn't get done. They get to claim their championship. It's in the record book. Florida State would have been in the record book. That's why I was surprised that all the players opted out, because it didn't make any sense. And I heard,
see, the biggest thing that I've looked at when you, like, you're comparing apples to hand grenades here, because take Michigan as an undefeated Big Ten champion and then not put them in the playoffs. You would shit down your leg for months. You would never let go of it.
Matt, we would never get left out because we're in the Big Ten, buddy.
There you go.
That makes the most money. That's the whole thing I've been saying. Come to the Big Ten, Florida State. Come right in. Then you'll never have to worry about this.
But that was where the line was wrong. With UCF, they weren't in that Power 5 group. And supposedly within that Power 5 group, the general consensus, whether it was Pac-12 at ACC, whatever, it was go undefeated, win your conference, and you get a seat at the table. And when they moved the goalposts on it, that was what pissed everyone off.
See,
and then you see the negative downward cycle of ESPN made that change, and then their financial stock continues to fall off. Almost like you can't just force it down everyone's throat of who you want them to talk about.
But see, that's where, if Texas wouldn't have beat Bama, so I think all your hate should go to Texas. If Texas didn't win that game, it would have been easy. Because then Texas would have been out, Florida State and Bama would have been in, and Bama would have been, undefeated? So they probably would have been like ranked 2. Washington probably would have been 3, and then, or Bama would have been 1. It wouldn't have mattered what the order was. So then the Bama-Michigan game probably would have been the national championship game, and overtime national championship. That would have been awesome. Everyone would have loved it. So I think Texas was the one that really screwed everybody up. They screwed everyone out of an easy playoff, because by putting Texas in, they couldn't put Bama in without Texas, right? Because they beat them. You got to have that head-to-head power loss. That's like the same thing happened with the NCAA softball. They put every single SEC team in the tournament, and it's like, why? I hate Duke as much as the next guy, but their softball team had a great record, didn't get the regional host. Why? Because they had to put all the SEC teams in. And I've seen a lot of people start to criticize the SEC week scheduling, and it's the same thing for football. And don't worry, if it's starting to drip over into softball, where people are seeing it, saying like, look, they don't play anybody, and they're playing like taking these week schedules to inflate their win-loss. Once this playoff expands, and they're seeing the same thing, where SEC is only playing an 8-game schedule still, like, get the hell out of here. We're not putting you in. Because like the TV networks are going to have the pick. And I know that they might have been, that's the one thing that made me annoyed with, if they do expand with just having ESPN do the playoff TV deal, that's a bad move, because they directly have an impact of only picking SEC schools, because they're the only ones that have that TV contract. So they want as many in as possible, like last year, where if there was more split, I wonder if you would see a lot of SEC schools that have that weaker schedule start to get called out more. Because it's annoying, because they don't play anybody. They play an 8-game schedule, where if Michigan played an 8-game schedule this year and they got the pick of dropping like an Oregon or a Washington or like one of the other top 5 teams they have to play, no one would be complaining at all. People would say that's still a tough schedule, but they don't get that luxury. Like if they would have got to play Central Michigan or someone instead of Oregon, I think people would have been like, damn, Michigan still has a tough schedule. Texas, Ohio State, Washington, USC. But it's like, nah, 9-game schedule. Meanwhile, Bama's like, who's your toughest game? They're like, Texas, maybe. We don't know. We got to get the schedule worked out. We got to see who we should play. We can only play 2 or 3 tough games, guys. Come on. Come on. That's why I want to see what it takes for Notre Dame to get into the playoffs. The first time they're close and they get left out for a team with a lesser record is when, if I'm them, I'm concerned. And they're not proactive at all. Notre Dame is so reactive that they will wait until they get left out to make a move. So the ACC, I don't think, has to worry for now. It'll be the first time Notre Dame gets jumped that they go DEFCON 5 or whatever, and they're like, "Get the hell out of here! We gotta make some moves. We're leaving the ACC deal. Screw that!" And then the ACC will be scrambling the next year to try to fill their schedule because Notre Dame will blow it up if Florida State doesn't leave before. But that's really the main topics I had this week. I know Caitlin Clark was playing her first WNBA game. What do you think the ratings are going to be on that? Good? Average? Bad?
I would say average.
I mean, I've seen a lot of people talking about it, and I've seen a lot of people complain about how they tuned in, and it was like a ref show, and how there were so many missed layups. And that's what I was saying the entire time. Like, you can't have a product that's still not the same. It's not as exciting as men's basketball. It's just not. So you can't put superstars in there. And then if they're not shooting or doing like things that are impressive, people aren't going to tune in. They're just not. That's why some of the superstars for WNBA here, how they're not making as much money. I'm like, you have to have the ratings though. And so I want to see what the ratings are actually going to be like if they can look at it, and then they'll get their pay. If Caitlin Clark can raise the league profile, she'll get paid more. I mean, no one's watching the Knicks play the Hawks on like a Tuesday night anyway. I mean, everyone knows that the ratings are going down. So what's the difference? It's not like WNBA is replacing NBA ratings. They're just both low. Simple as that. Maybe basketball is not as popular. I watched some of the NBA playoffs with the Celtics going on, and it's like brutal to watch now. Just so many flops. And everyone made fun of soccer, and I've seen that complaint kind of drop off, and I'm like, it makes sense. Because it's infected basketball. So you can't make fun of soccer. It's worse than basketball. They're dudes flexing after a foul call where they're barely touched, Matt. Barely touched. A guy will come in for a two-handed monster dunk. A guy barely grazes his elbow. They're whistling, and then that guy's flexing, and I'm like, how am I impressed by this? Like, I'm like, the Celtics are looking decent. Like, they could win the championship, but it's like, going back to those Garnett type years, there's definitely a complete change in the game where there's so much more flopping now and theatrics that it's a different game. Is like you were talking about how college is going back to getting like big bruisers, and I was joking with you because Michigan has 2 transfers coming in that are like 7 foot tall. I'm saying we're going to compete with Purdue now on having like these 2 gigantic dudes down low. That's all great, but if they're calling ticky-tack fouls, and like Caitlin Clark's in the WNBA, they know the fans are there to watch her, and they're still fouling her out. Well, what are we doing? It's almost like we don't. The refs are saying like we don't care. We don't care what you're there for. This is the WNBA. It's a bad product, and then people aren't going to watch. That's why the NBA, there was nothing that like, got me exciting. The NHL, watching the Hurricanes battle back against the Rangers, I don't want to jinx it. Because I was hoping that the Canes would go all the way. And then they came out, went in an 0-3 hole, and I thought, they're done. They're done. They should have been eliminated. They should have been swept. And they had a goal at the end of that third period, I think, to get it to overtime, maybe. I can't remember what the games were. But they had a late goal on a power play that kind of kept them alive. And then last game, they killed them. And I'm like, are they going to be able to come back? The NBA, it's like, oh, is the team going to shoot hot? Or how many free throws are they going to have? 50? 60? How many, like, what kind of game am I going to watch today? So there's like a different atmosphere. The basketball doesn't seem as intense watching it as what I remember even a decade ago. with some of those LeBron teams playing like the Warriors. I don't even think that was a decade ago. 5 years ago? 6 years ago? When some of those games, they were pretty heated. I'm just not seeing the same level of intensity. And I think that's where you get the drop-off between some of the TV ratings. And like I've been watching the UFL trying to get that back up. But I don't know if that's going to be enough down the stretch to keep the league going. We did have some fans come out, leave some comments about the AFL on how they were saying that they wanted them to just fold the league. At this point, if you have teams going bankrupt, fans aren't going to show up because they're not going to be there, right? And it's a good point. Like if you're going to make plans to go see an arena football game, you get there and they might not play. At that point, just cancel the entire thing. Shut it down because you lost the trust of the fans. And that's kind of where seeing some of the highlights from the Caitlin Clark, like first game, she didn't score a first point till like the second quarter because she's in foul trouble. Like, give me a break. Like, you immediately put her in foul trouble. It makes no sense. Like, what are you doing? And it was a layup she made. She wasn't even like a deep three or something to announce herself. She went right for the tried and true layup of the WNBA staple. I think it's on the ball. I think, isn't the ball a picture of a lady doing a layup? Maybe I'm wrong, but if you go to the store and you look at the official WNBA ball, I'm pretty sure it's a picture of a lady doing a layup on the ball. But that's pretty much all I had this week. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, that's it.
I know. It's the off season. Like I said, we've been doing some shorter shows. The feed's up. We've been trying to put the podcast out more. I'm working on a newsletter section, which I'll try to put a link up like on Twitter. I don't know how long it's going to take me to actually get our content ported over, where you can just sign up and get the new episodes emailed directly to you every week whenever I post them. Or if you want to just listen in your podcast app, you go to southboundsports.com and it should take you right to the our Spotify page that has all the other clients there, except for maybe YouTube. You might have to do that inside the YouTube app. But we appreciate all your support. Like I said, been working on trying to get some improvements for the delivery of the show. We know we've reached some new audience by doing this over the last couple weeks. So I appreciate. Hopefully you can stick around, tell your friends about the show, and we will see you next week.